In today's video for Alpha Universe, I'm going to show you how I got this shot of Fanta. We're going to talk about the gear that I used, the camera settings, and of course, more importantly, the techniques that I used to make this image happen. Welcome back to Alpha Universe. My name is Miguel Quiles, and let's get right into the topic today, which is how I created this image of Fanta. I'll leave her Instagram in the description of this video. The makeup here was done by Agnes Barnett, who will also be linked in the description. Super important that you have great makeup on your subjects if you're trying to create this kind of interesting type of look. So as far as the gear is concerned, I have the image opened up here in Capture One. This image was taken with the Sony Alpha 7R Mark III. And I used the Sony 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 G Master lens. This is version 1 of the lens. This image was taken about, let's see, going through the EXIF data here, it was taken about actually March of 2017. So this was before the version 2 of the lens came out. But version 1 is a fantastic lens, and I often talk about it in my videos that it's a very sharp lens to use for studio portraits and for outdoor portraits as well. Let's talk about the settings here. So the settings are kind of interesting. In camera, your settings when you're using a flash, which I did use some flashes for these shots. I used the Sony HVLF 45RM, 45RM is here and the 60RM is here. And I'll talk about how I use those momentarily, but the camera settings that I'm about to tell you, they control the ambient light that's in the room. They don't necessarily do anything as far as exposing what you're seeing here in this shot. So with that being said, camera settings for the ambient light, it was f3.2, which I chose that aperture because I wanted to have a little bit of fall off in this shot. So I want to get the eyes sharp. But if you see in this portrait, her eye is nice and sharp, lots of detail in the skin around that area. But then as you look at this eye here in the back, you're going to notice that it's kind of falling out of focus, and that's cool. That's something that I wanted to happen. It was an artistic choice, and the way to do that, shooting at f3.2. My ISO value was at ISO 100, and my shutter speed here was a 1 second shutter speed. Now that's not very common for studio portraits. Normally you'd be at like 1/160th, 1/125th of a second, something like that. In this case, I did a 1 second exposure, so I dragged the shutter and kept it open for much longer. And the reason for that is that I wanted to get this light. You see in the back, you've got this green kind of haze of a light, and I'll show you how I created that effect. In order to get that effect, you have to drag the shutter. You have to have the shutter open for a little bit longer than what you might think. So this one was a 1 second shutter. And I was at 150 millimeters on that 70 to 200, by the way, here in the EXIF data. All right, so let's talk about the gear that I used to take this photograph. Now, this was actually just 2 lights and a reflector. The main light that I used for this shot was the HVLF 60RM. It's a speed light made by Sony. It's fast, bright, really, really good flash, especially if you're using it for your main light. And I had this inside of a silver umbrella, and that silver umbrella was basically just above her, kind of pointed downward. So this is what I used for the main light. Then I put a silver reflector underneath in front of her, so that basically when that flash goes off, some of the light hits the reflector and it kind of comes up and it fills in and softens some of the shadows underneath her chin. And it also adds highlights on her shoulders, on her neck. It just makes the image look really nice and beautiful. Then here's where the magic comes in. So to take this shot, what I ended up doing was I shot in a front curtain sink. So what happens is, when I take the photograph, right, we have a 1 second exposure, the flash goes off immediately. As soon as I take the shot, flash goes off and it freezes the subject. Okay, this is the way flash photography works. When you're photographing somebody with a flash and you take that photograph, as long as they're relatively still, you're gonna freeze them. And anything else that is moving within the frame is going to appear kind of ghostly. You know, you're gonna see trails depending on how long you drag that shutter. So with knowing that, what I wanted to do was create this kind of green, hazy type effect that almost looked like it was smoke. So what I did was I took a second flash. This was the 45 RM, and I'm going to turn this thing on here. And what's really cool with these Sony lights is that they actually have these built-in LED lights. And so what I did was I had that LED light behind Fanta, which, looking at my monitor here, so I had it somewhere off camera, out of the frame. And what I ended up doing was I used one of these types of gels. Now this gel is not the exact color that I used because I actually don't have any more of this color. Need to get another pack, but very similar to this. And what I ended up doing was I cut a small piece of this gel and I placed it over the light. And so you're gonna see that when that gel goes over the top of the light, it changes the color of that light. So I left this gelled light on constantly. It was just basically sitting on a stand. It was on the entire time. So with that being turned on, we'll turn this thing off here. That's actually what you're seeing in that kind of green ghostly light is the LED light from the HVLF 45 RM that is being gelled green. So again, taking you back to the photo shoot. I'm standing there, I have my A7R III, 70 to 200 at 150 millimeters. I have those settings dialed in. And what I'm doing with my camera is I have that main light, I have the reflector below, I have the light from behind, the gel is, this gelled light is turned on the whole time. As soon as I take that photograph, front curtain sync, the flash freezes the model, right? So you'll see, if you're looking at this shot, she's sharp, right? And it's gonna be kind of weird. There's some voodoo magic that happens with photography here because what I ended up doing was, once I took that photograph and I saw that flash go off, I took my camera and I started shaking it around. Okay, it's weird, it sounds weird, it feels weird, it looks weird. I know when I photographed her, she was like, what in the world are you doing? But I took that photograph and I started shaking the camera all around the place. And once the exposure was done, being made, you'll see that she was sharp, she's detailed because the flash froze her in the image. And then you're getting this awesome, cool, kind of ethereal type of ghostly vibe to the image because as you're shaking the camera, you're essentially light painting, right? So most people, when they're light painting, the camera's on a tripod and someone takes the light and they move it around. In this case, what I did was I had the light steady because it was sitting on a stand, and then I just shook my camera all over the place to basically do the same type of thing. So there's two ways to be able to do it. You could, in theory, have your camera on a tripod, get a light of some sort and basically just paint, flash the light over the person, and it would give you some sort of effect. But I felt like this was a lot easier, a lot more fun to create. Literally dial in those settings, have your main light, have a reflector, have a gel light from behind, front curtain sync, take that photograph, it's gonna freeze your subject, shake the camera around for the rest of the exposure, and you're gonna need to do this a few times. Now, this particular one, if I open up, let's go back here to some of the other shots I took, you're gonna see that it took several iterations of this, right? So these are some of the other raw shots here. You can see that depending on how I move the camera, it's gonna give like an entirely different effect. Okay, so you're gonna need to take a lot of these photos because each time it's gonna give you something different until you get the type of shot that you want. So that's how I created this photograph. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. It's kind of a new format for content here for Alpha Universe, so let me know what you think. I wish I would have had behind the scenes to show you guys exactly how I took this photograph. Unfortunately, I didn't, but this is the next best thing. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. While you're there, make sure you subscribe to Alpha Universe because we have new videos releasing here all the time. Now, if you want to learn more about portrait photography and studio photography, check out the video that you see here on the screen. I'll see you there.